Picture this. What if I told you that in less than 60 days, the Supreme Court could hand the Republicans a permanent 26-seat advantage in the House of Representatives, making it virtually impossible for the Democrats ever to regain control again? It's not just a possibility. It's actually happening right now. And the liberal justices are having complete meltdowns in open court. Stick with me to the very end of this video because I'm going to show you exactly how the Supreme Court is about to deliver the single biggest GOP victory ever. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, enjoying yet another wonderful day in President Trump's golden age that you made possible back on November the 5th. So if you want a front row seat on how you continue to change the world in ways you never even imagined, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. What a day! What an extraordinary day. Yesterday, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in what is shaping up to be the single most important and consequential case that most people have never even heard of. One that could fundamentally reshape American politics for literally the next century, for generations. Now, the case before the court is called Louisiana versus Calais, and it threatens to dismantle the Democrats' most powerful election rigging tool that they've exploited for the last 4 decades. Racially gerrymandered districts mandated by the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Now, we talked about this in more detail in yesterday's video, but bottom line, since the 1980s, that's when this Voting Rights Act, the VRA, ended up getting exploited by the left. Since the 1980s, the courts have mandated the drawing up of racially segregated voting districts, all in the name, I kid you not, all in the name of combating racial discrimination. This is the logic. This is the logic of the movement that doesn't know what a woman is. The courts have mandated that states draw up districts that intentionally exclude white voters so as not to dilute, that's the legal term they use, so as not to dilute minority voters' ability to vote in their own Democrat candidates. So the VRA, the Voting Rights Act, has exploited this concocted notion of voter discrimination so as to draw up districts that guarantee Democrat seats. So that's all the VRA has become in the end. Once again, like USAID, it just turns out to be nothing more than just another Democrat slush fund. It's a court-mandated scheme to guarantee election outcomes that always work out in favor of the Democrats. So the court heard oral arguments yesterday, and all analysts are basically in agreement that the conservative majority is poised to crush this once and for all. They are going to declare every single racially gerrymandered district unconstitutional overnight. So let me break down the numbers here that have Democrats, including the 3 liberal justices, in absolute panic mode. If the Supreme Court rules as expected, studies project Republicans will gain 19 additional House seats from Voting Rights Act changes alone. 19. Now, when you combine that with the ongoing Republican redistricting efforts that grow by the day in response to California's Proposition 50, we are looking at a potential 30 to 40 seat swing toward the Republicans in the House. And again, keep in mind, none of these are swing seats. These would all be solid red Republican seats for the foreseeable future. So the GOP would not have to flip a single seat to lock in a permanent majority. They would only need to win seats that are already overwhelmingly Republican. Again, it's yet another sign of just how far the nation has shifted to the right over the last decade. Without these shenanigans, the Democrats simply could never come to power again. Now, there were 2 revealing moments, 2 frankly earth-shattering moments yesterday that revealed that the days of progressive liberalism really are officially over. The first involves liberal Justice Sotomayor getting absolutely eviscerated by Principal Deputy Solicitor General Hashim Mupon for how the VRA, the Voting Rights Act, is objectively and undeniably discriminatory towards white voters. Check this out.
You could control for partisan effect. There was racially polarized voting even within the Democratic Party. That's where Section 2 matters, where you have a reason to think that a racial group is being treated.
You have some of that here, too. You have proof of that here.
No, you don't. What you have here is that Republicans and Democrats are different.
No, you have some that even white Republicans or white Democrats won't vote for black candidates.
Right, but if these were white Democrats, there's no reason to think they would have a second district. None. And so what is happening here is their argument is because these Democrats happen to be black, they get a second district. If they were all white, we all agree they wouldn't get a second district. That is literally the definition of race subordinating traditional principles.
Now, that was absolutely brilliant. Sotomayor thought she cornered him by framing political party as inseparable from race. Okay, so that's the key. That's the golden ticket for these liberal justices. The reason why, in this case, Louisiana blacks, it's Louisiana versus Calais. The reason why Louisiana blacks are being discriminated against and why they need their own district is because they want to elect Democrat candidates and white Republicans are preventing them from doing it. That's the vote dilution that they talk about. White Republicans overwhelm their vote. They dilute their vote and prevent blacks from ever electing the Democrat candidates of their choice. And that, according to Sotomayor, is voter discrimination. And this Solicitor General absolutely blew that apart by pointing out that if these were white Democrats, if white Democrats were being denied the candidates of their choice, they would never get their own district. Isn't that brilliant? They would never get this is not about, people just want to be able to vote for who they want, and they're being prevented. No. If these were white Democrats getting their vote diluted by white Republicans, they'd never get their own district. The only reason why these Democrats, in particular in Louisiana, are getting their own district, the only reason is because they are black. It's because of their race. These are, by definition, racially segregated districts, and that is blatantly unconstitutional. If these Democrats were white, they would never get their own district ever. It would never be mandated by the courts. Brilliant, brilliant point. But the most revealing and frankly embarrassing moment of them all came from the auto pen appointee herself, the DEI justice par excellence. Wait until you see this monstrosity. But as the Democrat power structure collapses right before their waking eyes, it's all happening at the exact moment when Trump's economic policies are reshaping global finance. For example, you've seen gold and silver prices absolutely skyrocketing of late. Now, what's so key here is that this isn't coincidence. It's the direct result of President Trump's pro-growth agenda. Lower interest rates, strategic dollar, weakening to boost American exports, and policies designed to rebuild domestic manufacturing. Now, Goldman Sachs actually just raised their 2026 gold outlook, I kid you not, to $4,900 per ounce. And many analysts think they're being conservative. We got over 3 more years of these America First policies ahead of us, which means this upward trajectory of gold ain't slowing down anytime soon. This is exactly why smart Americans are taking control of their retirement accounts by backing them with physical gold and silver. My friends at Augusta Precious Metals understand that in times of economic warfare, whether it's against Antifa's financiers or foreign adversaries, you need assets that can't be manipulated by the same corrupt system Trump is fighting. Augusta is working with Americans who have over $50,000 in their IRAs, 401ks, or other retirement accounts to make the smart move into smart money. The economy is changing rapidly, but gold and silver have always been used to store wealth through good times and bad. Reach out to Augusta by going to turleygold.com. That's turleygold.com. You can also call them at 844-763-3908 or text Turley to 35052. That's 35052. The economy is changing rapidly, but gold and silver have stored wealth through every crisis in human history. While Trump wages financial war against the radical left money machine, shouldn't you be protecting your own wealth with the same assets central banks around the world are hoarding? Go to turleygold.com. That's turleygold.com or text Turley to 35052 for instant access to a free report revealing the greatest threat to your retirement today.
I guess I'm thinking of it, of the fact that remedial action, absent discriminatory intent, is really not a new idea in the civil rights laws. And my kind of paradigmatic example of this is something like the ADA. Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act against the backdrop of a world that was generally not accessible to people with disabilities. And so it was discriminatory in effect because these folks were not able to access these buildings. And it didn't matter whether the person who built the building or the person who owned the building intended for them to be exclusionary. That's irrelevant. Congress said the facilities have to be made equally open to people with disabilities if readily possible. I guess I don't understand why that's not what's happening here. The idea in Section 2 is that we are responding to current day manifestations of past and present decisions that disadvantage minorities and make it so that they don't have equal access to the voting system, right? They're disabled. In fact, we use the word disable in Milligan. We say that's a way in which you see that these processes are not equally open.
Yep. You just heard that. Yep. That was real. That was a Supreme Court justice giving a paradigmatic example, her paradigmatic example of what she means about black voters being discriminated against. Black voters, according to Justice Autopen, are disabled. You can't make this up. Blacks are akin to being disabled. She used the Americans with Disabilities Act as her framework for why we need racially segregated congressional districts. And that's because black voters are, in effect, disabled. Gang, this isn't legal scholarship. There isn't a legal thought in that frame. This is far left ideological nuttery disguised as jurisprudence. Did you know that analysts have pointed out that Ketanji Jackson actually speaks more than all male justices combined during oral arguments, yet she consistently fails to provide any substantive legal reasoning in any of her banter? I know this is hard to comprehend if you're an Autopen appointee who doesn't know what a woman is. I get it, right? She's not a biologist after all. But for the vast majority of the nation, this is not difficult at all. Not even kind of. If the civil rights movement was about ending racial discrimination, how on earth can federal law mandate drawing congressional districts based on race? Again, this isn't hard. Might be hard for me to say, but if the civil rights movement were really all about ending racial discrimination, how can the courts mandate the drawing up of racially segregated districts? As the great Justice Clarence Thomas himself masterfully demonstrated, Louisiana's second majority black district would simply not exist without federal courts forcing racial considerations in drawing up that district. In other words, Justice Thomas simply asked, again, this is pure common sense, but thoroughly juridical in its reasoning. If race were not a consideration in the least, if we took race off the table, would Louisiana's districts look the same way as they do today? And of course, the answer is, of course not. If the districts were mandated by the courts to be deliberately drawn up in such a way that excludes white voters, then race is the principal rationale for why the districts look the way they do. It is racial discrimination, plain and simple. You can appeal to all the past, present, future racism you want. You can appeal to all the Americans with Disability Acts that you want. In the end, liberals are openly defending blatantly racially discriminatory districts. They are defending districts that discriminate on the basis of race. They are defending that in the name of liberalism. In the end, this case represents so much more than just redistricting. It's about constitutional principles that equally apply to all versus progressive ideology that selectively applies to only some. I'll say that again because that was good. That was good. It's about constitutional principles that equally apply to all. It's called the rule of law. That equally apply to all versus progressive ideology that selectively applies to only some. The same Supreme Court that struck down affirmative action is now positioned to eliminate race-based gerrymandering. We are witnessing the systematic restoration of colorblind constitutional law. If Republicans prevail, and all indicators suggest they will, we're looking at structural changes that will give the GOP a lock on congressional power for literally decades. A lock they deserve given the massive shift towards the right among the vast majority of the American electorate across the board. The evidence is overwhelming. The constitutional arguments are absolutely clear, and the political implications are staggering. Democrats built their House majority on a foundation of racial gerrymandering disguised as civil rights. That foundation is about to crumble, and with it, their dreams of ever returning to political power again. The only question remaining is whether Americans are ready for genuine constitutional government based on equal protection rather than racial preferences. Based on yesterday's oral arguments, the Supreme Court is ready to find out. Do you want to ask me your biggest questions and maybe win free merch while you're at it? Well, join my Courageous Patriot Club and be part of the uncensored Monday night Q&A, all for only $10 a month at turley.pub/club.